Well, I kind of already touched on this before about what the original rationale was for sandboxes. It was basically a deployment model for people without farm access. It's good for the users. Say you're in a very large environment and lots of people are depending on the SharePoint farm. You can understand that administrators aren't really keen on having lots of custom code deployed to their farm that could cause it to come down. So the administrators are happy because they have a way to regulate what's being deployed to their farm, and the users are happy because they don't have to go through a deployment process. A lot of times when you're deploying things, something that has to go onto the server, it can take a long time in certain environments. And in this case, if you're just deploying something to a site collection, if you have access to the site collection, you can do whatever you want. So basically all you're doing is just, you're uploading a solution file to a site collection and then activating features in it. So again, the idea of the solution, or sandbox solution, is just to protect the farm from bad code. So if somebody does an endless loop inside their code that's endlessly looping, or say there's a list of 30,000 items that somebody wants to loop through one by one, that's not good. Or let's say, for example, it's a farm solution and they do elevated privileges, they do spsecurity.run with elevated privileges, and then they start, the application does something that's not good. So maybe it tries to manipulate web application or farm resources, which would not be good in most cases, or just accessing things that the deploying user shouldn't access. Another thing that's nice is the farm administrators can see the solution health, and they can actually see how much resources it's using, and they can throttle it. However, that's less of an emphasis now. We shouldn't really care about that. You shouldn't be deploying any code, any server-side code in your solutions anymore. It should just be for, you can deploy client-side code. That's great. That just runs on the client. No big deal there. But no, you shouldn't be deploying server-side code. It's great for just deploying those provisioning resources. And speaking of provisioning, these are the different types of feature elements that are allowed. So you can deploy content types, fields, custom actions, modules, which is really important. That means you can deploy files. And basically the rule of thumb is that whatever you deploy is always going to go to the site collection. You can't touch anything that goes to the 15 hive. No system files, only whatever is in your site collection. Whatever goes into the site collection, which basically translates to the content database, not the file system. So the 15 hive is the file system. With a sandbox solution, you're not touching the file system. You're just touching the content database. And that's why all these feature elements, they deploy things to the site collection. List instances, list templates. You can do receivers, however, that's kind of frowned upon because we don't want any code at all inside of sandbox solutions. No server-side code, that is. So these are the prohibited feature elements. So control is pretty obvious because when you create and deploy a control, it has to go to the 15 hive, and you can't do that. Same with custom action group, document converter. Now these are server-side SharePoint object model classes that are supported, but however, you shouldn't be thinking this way. You shouldn't want to do any server-side code at all in your sandbox solutions. So these are all things that are prohibited. So the SharePoint site constructor is prohibited because you can use tokens when you initialize the SP sites. That's kind of like using run as elevated privileges. You can create the SP site in the context of a different user, and the SP security is there because that has that run with elevated privileges delegate method. So the basic rule of thumb is don't do any code inside of sandbox solutions. No server-side code. Make it all client-side. If you need server-side code, that's when it's time to do an app using the new SharePoint 2013 app model. So now what we'll do is we'll take a look at deploying a list, provisioning a list using a sandbox solution. I have Visual Studio open right now, and I've created a blank solution called Chapter 11, and I'm going to create a new project now. What we're going to do is we're going to provision a list to our site collection using a Sandbox solution. So I'm going to add new project. I want an empty project, empty SharePoint project. I'm going to call it Chapter 11 also. Now the familiar customization wizard comes up. This dialog is asking me, what do we want to use for debugging? We want to use that site. And this is the important part. Deploy as a Sandbox solution. That's what we want. So I'm going to keep that choice. I'm going to click Finish. And now I'm going to add an item, new item to my solution. And I'm going to add a list. And I'm just going to call it My Custom List. Click Add. It's communicating with SharePoint right now to figure out the different list templates that are on the site, in the site collection already, and asking me if I want to customize one of the existing list templates or create a list based on one of the existing list templates. So I'm just going to use the default, which is the custom list, which basically has no fields in it except for title and a few other system fields, ID, title. So I'm going to go ahead and keep these defaults. I'm going to create the list, and now I can specify the columns. So I'm just going to create one column called My Custom Column. Save that. Okay, so pretty basic list. I could just right click here and tell it to deploy, and it would deploy to the site collection, and it would do everything it does for a farm solution. It would go ahead and activate the solution and activate the features in the solution. I don't want to do that though. What I do want to do is I want to publish this, and I want to publish it to a file system. So I'm going to publish it to my desktop. So that's going to create a WSP file. And here's my WSP, chapter11.WSP. So I'm going to come back over to my site. I'm going to go into Site Settings and Solutions, back to my Solutions gallery, and I'm going to upload that solution. So I'm going to browse to chapter11.WSP. There it is. I'll go ahead and upload that. And it's uploaded now, so I'm going to go ahead and activate it. Actually, I'm going to close this so we can just take a look at it. So it's here. It's in the solution gallery now. I'm going to select it, and it hasn't been activated yet, so next step is to activate it. And I have to click here to activate it on the actual activate button. So we can verify if it's activated by clicking here, and sure enough it is. It's activated because this is now enabled. The deactivate button is now enabled. So it didn't activate my feature, so now what I need to do is I'm going to need to go into Site Settings, and I'm going to manage this. My feature was at SP Web level, at the site level, not site collection. So here's my feature, Chapter 11 feature. So when I activate this, I should see it should put an item in the quick launch there for the list, and then we should also see the list when we go to site content. So let me activate that, and here it is. Here's my custom list. I can navigate to that. And here it is. Here's our title column and my custom column. So you can see this is really useful that we're able to provision a list to a site. And think of all the other things that you can do. You can provision things. You can use module elements. You want to provision files. That's pretty powerful as well. If you want to provision a bunch of images, that type of thing, you know, master pages, whatever it might be. We didn't have to deploy this to the farm. We deployed it to, we basically just made a WSP file and manually uploaded it to the solution gallery. So this is something that a site collection owner can do. They can go in to the solution gallery, or a site collection administrator. They can go in and upload their own solutions and have more control over a site, more of a power user feel to it, so they don't have to bog down the farm administrators.